Yeah. Brother D, good yourself, D. Sure. Yes, it's virtual. It's virtual, my friend. No. He didn't call me in connection with. Oh, yeah. I told him. Yeah, I told him. Uh,
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning, Honorable Sir. How are you doing?
Yes, maybe we can start and conclude.
No, we're now getting ready to get going. It is exactly 10 o'clock, so that's why.
Okay, no, that's fine, Chair.
Yeah. No, we'll have to get going. I'm just wanting to check. Mashile our members all here?
Not all of them, Chair. We can just wait for 2-3 minutes for other members to come in. Honorable Sgete is struggling to get in, but I'm linking him. No.
Okay. No, that is great. I do think we have quite a full presentation, and looking at it, realize that there are a number of slides and a number of conversations to be had, all 44 slides, and so there's a lot of detail that we need to go through. But let me, without wasting too much time, let's begin the meeting, Mashile, and as members come in, we'll get going. Good morning, honorable members on the platform, and good morning to the team from the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation. I think this briefing today is long overdue, in that first and foremost that it's been a desperate cry of this portfolio committee to look at what the medium-term development plan looks like, what are some of the critical objectives, and ultimately how do we achieve a relationship between priority, planning, funding, assessment of the programs, and ultimately how do we hold the executive to account. So I think given the opportunity of a third budget fortuitously, it gives the portfolio committee an opportunity to not only assess the next budget against the presentation today as to how and where are some of the indicators and what some of the thinking behind it that inform some of the figures in the budget. I do think it's important that when we also look at the medium term, we understand what the executive's long-term objectives are. So today is a very, very crucial conversation. I want to thank honorable members who took time yesterday to sit with the Bureau of Economic Research from Stellenbosch, looking at some of the macroeconomic indicators and looking at some of the budget cycles that we've gone through in the last 30 years. So we come to this particular conversation in some ways, in part as a continuation of some of the discussion we had yesterday on the offsite, but also in many ways looking at how we unpack the details that go into next week's budget as a committee. I'm going to look at the agenda that has been presented before you. It is a
recording in progress.
Straightforward budget in that we will consider apologies. We have a presentation from the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluations. We'll take deliberations from that. And then I'd like to ask members to stay because we've got a number of minutes that are outstanding from the previous term, but also need to take a strong consideration of taking the committee program for the second term, given the nature of the program that we're going into with the haste that we have to do to get the budget through. So I'm going to ask honorable members if you can commit to stay a little bit longer so that we can correct and adopt the appropriate reports as we go. With that in mind, let me ask if there's any member on the platform who would like to move for the adoption of the agenda.
Good morning, Chair. I'm fine to adopt the agenda as is.
Thank you very much, Honorable Waitlin. Is there a member who could second the adoption of the agenda?
Thanks, Chair. It's Mkonto. I second the adoption of the agenda.
Siyabonga, Mama. Thank you so much, Honorable Member. Let me, with that in mind, equally so, Mashile, are there any apologies that any members would have sent for today?
Yes, good morning, Chair and honorable members on the platform as well as colleagues. The apology we received today, it's from Ms. Nomfusi Chaso, and she's on sick leave, and then Mr. Jabu Majosi is with higher education. And I was informed last week that the minister would be in a cabinet meeting today. He may not show up, but it will be confirmed throughout the course of time. Thank you, sir.
Those apologies having been noted, may I then, in the light of that, I recognize the DG in the department, and then I'd like to welcome the team from the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluations. If I can ask that obviously you introduce the team, and let me ask, the presentation is quite, it is onerous in that it's no understatement that there are 44 slides. So, you know, even if you just spend a minute on each slide, that's already 3/4 of an hour. So I want to ask that, firstly, be conscious of the fact that the team, that the committee has been furnished with the presentation itself. That's one. Secondly, if I can ask that we go through, because we want to allow time for deliberations. I can't think of anything more important than this medium-term development plan. And then for members to be able to have opportunities to interact with it, engage it, ask direct questions. So let me allow the team from DPME to then take lead. You can begin, sir, and then intro members. Thank you.
Good morning to the chairperson, Honorable
Oh, I
Maimane,
apologize. I didn't see the minister.
I joined
I
the team here. Thank you so much. I've joined the team in the absence of the minister who is in the cabinet committee, in the cabinet, sorry, as today is a cabinet day. Of course, I do share comments made by yourself, chairperson, that this is long overdue since the tabling officially in Parliament of the MTDP, who could have as well got into a series of engagements, especially with this committee, which we view as critical moving forward in the work that we're supposed to do. And greetings to all honorable members and the senior officials that are here. And I will shorten my remarks as well, Chairperson. But thank you for the invitation and honor and to brief the committee on this approved medium-term development plan, which ranges from 2024 to 2029. And this was adopted by extended cabinet at January Lekgotla and formally approved by cabinet on the 26th February 2025. And the President's State of the Nation address underscored three main priorities, that of inclusive economic growth and job creation, reducing poverty and tackling high cost of living, and building a capable and ethical and developmental state. So the MTDP provides the strategic approach that will guide government actions and priorities for the 7th administration and put South Africa on the path for inclusive growth and development that can achieve the goals set out in the statement of intent of the Government of National Unity, and also pursuing the goals, the vision of the Development Plan 2030. The MTDP marks a historic moment in our view, in our democracy. It gives effect to the second Government of National Unity in the democratic dispensation of our country. It does serve as a guide to the strategic intent and ensure that all the priorities are implemented through in a much more coherent manner. Furthermore, the MTDP provides a framework and targets to guide the actions of public sector institutions over this term. And this plan also marks a critical phase towards the National Development Plan, as it is in the final medium-term plan before the 2030 deadline of the MTDP. And this alone, Chairperson, I'm sure it provokes number of discussions. How far is the NDP with regards to its targets and so forth, and what work has to be undertaken within the shortest period of time. Therefore, it seeks to accelerate delivery of core areas, primary with a focus on realizing rapid, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth and job creation. So this program, MTDP, replaces the medium-term strategic framework, the MTSF, and seeks to overcome some of the challenges that have hindered focused planning and delivery, such as fragmented priorities and lack of integration across government. And Chair, I just want to indicate that the DPME provided a framework outlining the MTDP strategic priorities and outcomes, while government clusters were tasked with developing detailed implementation plans and sector-specific targets that are aligned with these priorities. The result framework of the MTDP unpacks these strategic priorities into interventions, targets, and implementing institutions as a way to set accountability mechanism. While inclusive economic growth and job creation are positioned as the apex priorities, their success is dependent on progress in reducing poverty and strengthening the state capacity. These priorities are interrelated and interdependent. So this will be elaborated, I think, through our presentation in the light, Chair, that you indicated that more time should be spared for the implementation. However, these remarks will be on record. And we say finally that the MTDP is more than just a policy document. It is a commitment to the people of South Africa to build a stronger economy, a more just society, and a future where opportunities is within reach for all. And Chairperson and members of the committee and the officials that are here, it is an honor and a pleasure to present with the approved medium-term development plan, and the department will elaborate how this plan is going to unfold. Thank you.
Yeah, Kialebocha, Deputy Minister, and I truly apologize for not recognizing you earlier. It is one of these things that when you are sharing on this virtual platform, it's difficult to see different people. But thank you for your remarks and your inputs. And you are welcome, and I appreciate you setting time aside to be with us here today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let me hand back to you and the team to proceed from
there. Dr. Nkuna, I think, will take us through now. Thanks.
Okay. Good morning once again, Honorable Chairperson, honorable members, and colleagues from the department. Chairperson, let me indicate that we are here accompanied by the DDGs and some chief directors from the department. I'm not going to introduce all of them, but only when they rise to speak will then indicate who is speaking. So without much ado, I'll ask DDG Godfrey Mashamba to start with the presentation. It is 44 slides as you have indicated. So I will request the DDG to just speak to the most salient points, some of which have already been attended to by the DM. Thank you. DDG Mashamba.
Thank you and good morning. Greetings. Thank you, DG and the Deputy Minister, and greetings to honorable members and the Chair of the Appropriations Committee and all the colleagues. I will switch off my camera so that we proceed with the presentation. As I load the presentation, I do hope it's showing now. If it's showing, then I'll proceed with the presentation. The presentation, Chair, covers the key points that were requested in a letter to the department or to the minister. It deals in the first part with the DPME mandate and goes on to indicate how the DPME contributes in the value chain of government. Then a large part of the presentation deals with the medium-term development plan, the methodology and process followed in its development, it touches on strategic priorities and key interventions, and also implementation modalities. Then it goes on to explain how DPME evaluations supports oversight by this committee and other committees of Parliament. Then we introduce a new issue, how DPME is planning to enhance assessment of expenditure against performance, because it's important to connect performance of government with how budgets are actually spent. In the first part of the presentation, the DPME derives its mandate from Proclamation 47 of July 2014, which establishes and entrusts the responsibility to the minister in the presidency responsible for planning, monitoring, and evaluation. And in summary, the core functions are planning, which in this instance deals with long-term planning in the form of National Development Plan, the medium-term planning in the form of the 5-yearly strategic plans of government, as like the medium-term development plan, which we're talking about today, as well as coordination of planning across government on an annual basis in terms of the annual performance plans of government departments, provinces, as well as institutions of government. Then the mandate covers also ongoing tracking of implementation of progress, which is the monitoring aspect of it, and then evaluation of critical government programs with a view to improve decision-making as well as budget prioritization. And we use all this evidence to direct interventions and coordinate and escalate issues that need to be escalated to Cabinet and President so that corrective intervention can be administered. How DPME fits in the value chain of government. There is an impact statement that is articulated in the DPME strategic plan draft that will be approved soon, that we focus on improving countries' development outcomes by doing all the work that's done, which I've just explained now. Firstly, looking at the NDP and the MTDP and the whole hierarchy of plans across the spheres of government and in agencies of government. By putting outcomes, developmental outcomes in mind, that guides everything else that happens. The department supports implementation government priorities by improving government-wide planning through, for instance, what I've just explained, long-term planning, medium-term planning, but also specialization of plans to make sure that plans can connect, what is planned in government can connect to localities across the country. Then in this term, there is also a discourse that is starting around planning long-term beyond 2030. Given the stage at which we are, it's 5 years towards 2030. So DPME will do its work in terms of coordinating and facilitating the thinking around planning for beyond 2030. Regular monitoring, I've explained that, but promoting utilization of evidence in the planning implementation monitoring. I'm happy, Chair, you mentioned interaction of the committee with the Bureau for Economic Research. We have just been interacting with Bureau for Economic Research last week in their conference. We do that all the time, not only with this one, but with other producers of evidence and independent research groups across the country to enhance the body of evidence that government uses to understand progress of a country, progress of particular programs and their impact in different spaces. So we play in that space. So we promote use of evidence in planning, implementation, monitoring, and also evaluation of government priorities. Now, this year is an important year to incorporate also the mandate of the public enterprises that has been announced by the President, and that process is ongoing. So it contains a whole range of work related to oversight and coordination of a government's role in the public enterprises and their development impact. Then there's work that we do engaging with relevant stakeholders across the system in society, including private sector and also civil society, to mobilize a effort for development in the country. Then the work on strengthening coordination structures, such as the government clusters at levels of DGs and ministers, and also interface with cabinet processes on various aspects of the work of the department, particularly the biannual assessment of work of the government, where DPME is allocated what is called a POA week, where we interact with cabinet and members of the executive to give an assessment of progress in the country and provide certain recommendations that are meant to improve the workings of government and also developmental impact. Then we cross over now to the medium-term development plan. This slide reflects the roadmap that was taken to get to where we are now. Ordinarily, Honorable Chair, manifesto of a party winning elections every 5 years translates into government priorities and plans. But this time around in May 2024, the elections gave a different outcome where no one party won elections. So 10 parties agreed into forming the Government of National Unity, and they agreed on a statement of intent. And that statement of intent is the one that had translated into finalization and development and finalization of the medium-term development plan, which serves as a strategic government plan for the 5-year term. So there was a series of engagements that took place. Firstly, the Extended Cabinet Lekgotla meeting in July, leading to the opening of Parliament of the 7th administration by the President, where an initial set of strategic objectives for the term were announced. That informed a series of engagement that led to the development of the medium-term plan and consultations with various structures within government through the DG clusters and minister clusters, but also through the National Planning Commission to present its recommendations, as well as platforms such as the NEDLAC and others that have actually provided important recommendations to inform the planning. The Forum for South Africa's Directors General had a series of meetings, iterative, to manage the build-up of these activities in terms of planning, refining what was being presented and shared and consulted upon, leading to the final cabinet, Extended Cabinet Lekgotla in January, which then produced just before the State of the Nation address, the priorities that were then reiterated by the President in the State of the Nation address, leading now to approval of the MTDP in February 26. So this document of MTDP, the Deputy Minister has already alluded to this, that it has transitioned from what it was. The important issue in the renaming was to align with international conventions, naming conventions of this type of plans, but also greater emphasis to developmental outcomes, and a particular focus given here to reduce the number of interventions and the development of a results framework which pulls together a whole range of activities that happen across government to define the results framework for the 7th administration. The MTDP has 3 strategic priorities, which are interrelated, interlinked. The first one, driving inclusive growth and job creation. In is seen as an apex priority. Here, all spheres of government, clusters and sectors should prioritize relevant economic interventions. And this has already been done, and we can actually see it coming through in the draft plans that the DPME is busy assessing, draft plans from various parts of government, how they are prioritizing economic interventions in line with this articulation. Strategic priority 2, to reduce poverty and tackle high cost of living. It is important to have social protection as an instrument for poverty reduction and a safety net for the vulnerable communities. Then strategic priority 3, building state capabilities, ethical and developmental state. It's important to do that because a government delivers when it's capable of doing its job, including also creating an enabling environment for the economy to thrive, for the society to feel confident, but also to enforce law and order, ensure that law and order are maintained. Then important consideration in development of the medium-term development. I've already explained this, the strategic, the statement of intent that was agreed by the 10 parties in the GNU. We won't spend time on that. And then the other consideration being how that statement of intent links to the National Development Plan, how it was interpreted in terms of the National Development Plan Vision 2030. And we found that there's actually a great alignment between the two, how it also translates into these strategic priorities that I have, 3 strategic priorities that I've just explained now. Another important consideration is how local plans, domestic South African plans, aligns with relevant international frameworks, as in the Africa Agenda 2063 and SDG. There's a big alignment there, which a National Planning Commission has actually confirmed in various studies there. Then another important consideration is the scenarios about possible futures for South Africa to guide decision making. This was expressed also in the opening of Parliament by the President. He reflected on these 3 important scenarios, also indicating the preference that South Africa, or him as the President, would like us to see, the preferred scenario of a weaver work where a deliberate effort is taken to foster collective effort for jointly identifying priorities and working towards a cooperative nation kind of scenario. These scenarios gave us a forward-looking strategic analysis to use in mitigating risk, but also avoiding what is called undesirable futures, and to develop what we call an ideal development pathways for South Africa. So the Hadeda, recognition and vulture culture are undesirable, according to the statement by the President. Another important consideration is institutional mechanisms to support implementation. DPME is actually working with the Center of Government Departments on these institutional mechanism for effective implementation of the MTDP, and also risk management in the way we see things, because effective delivery of the MTDP is seen as a conduit for enhancing citizen trust and confidence in government institutions. The medium-term development plan's results framework has outlined the key interventions, indicators, and baselines, as well as things that we'll be looking for at midterm and end term as the impacts. So we have formulated these points here. There's a lot of detail behind the windows that we see on the screen that explains what exactly should be happening to make sure that government is effective in implementing the plan. Firstly, policy coherence in terms of how we think about the future, the economy, in terms of how we set priorities and what the different clusters of government are going to be focusing on. It's important. And things that different clusters should work together, where DPMA will play an active role in terms of intercluster, resolving intercluster issues, things that fall between the cracks, to make sure that they are given proper platforms to be addressed across the clusters. Alignment of budget and planning and budget, which I think, Honorable Chair, you've articulated to in the beginning, making sure that the medium term, what is prioritized in the medium term development plan, find expression in the medium term expenditure framework and budgets of institutions. Pinning also to what DPME intends to do in terms of assessing performance against expenditure. It's very important. Resource mobilization, how does government tap onto its ability to implement catalytic investment that can mobilize other resources from other actors in the system, including how we use development finance institutions to implement programs that are aligned with the government plan, and bringing in the private sector and international resources into the space to support development, and fostering a culture of quality in the public service, issues of institutional arrangements and delivery interventions, and a culture of performance monitoring and evaluation, and how government communicates and interacts with the public regarding performance. Now, the next set of slides go into details of each strategic priority. I won't go through all of them. I'll just select a few just to highlight, taking note that honorable members have had a chance to look through the slides. Under the first strategic priority, there are 9 outcome areas that are identified. I'll just highlight a few. For example, the work that government must do to create a policy environment that is ideal or enabling for private sector to increase job creation. It's important. And protecting existing jobs and intervening when such things happen, when there's threats of job losses or in vulnerable sectors. Optimizing public employment programs, making sure that they work to achieve what they're intended to do. There's work already planned with the Department of Employment and Labor to streamline and consolidate some of the programs that are being implemented now. So there's also an outcome on driving growth in labor-intensive sectors such as services, agriculture, manufacturing, mining. In this instance, you'll find that a strategic intervention to focus on processing of local minerals so that we export finished goods. The structural reforms, which is a big issue, continuing with the structural reforms under the okay.
Honorable, please mute. Whoever, Dr. Ngobo, you are in a meeting. Can you mute there?
The continuing with the Operation Vulindlela interventions, which have recorded a level of success in reducing the risk of energy security, load shedding, but also ensuring long-term energy security, but also introducing the new wave of structural reforms, which have now been announced last week by the President to improve workings of local government, digital transformation of the government services, and also tackling spatial inequalities. In this, you'll also find one critical intervention around the water sector, where the big focus on bulk water infrastructure and also better regulation of water services across the country and policy interventions to enable interventions that can correct failures at local government space. Now, infrastructure development is important in energy, communications, water, transport, and others. Simplifying regulations for public-private partnerships to enable resource mobilization that I spoke about. Energy security, very important. Having done the load shedding now, having reduced the risk of load shedding now from what it was 2 years ago, now we need to focus on long-term energy security, expanding the strengthening of the transmission networks, but also just energy transition to protect those that are exposed in a bad way to the in the process of transition to low carbon economy, but also playing in a space of green hydrogen energy projects. Then in this page also you'll see the need to also leverage priorities to leverage existing international relations. For example, in the Africa Free Trade area, BRICS and G20, on how this brings about economic outcomes of increased investment, trade and tourism, as well as science and technology innovation, how we mobilize and increase capacity for the science sector and R&D to contribute to industrialization, economic outcomes, and social outcomes, while also paying attention to inclusion, how we mainstream the rights of women, youth, and persons with disability to ensure that their economic inclusion. Then the second strategic objective has about 6 outcomes that are outlined here. Amongst these outcomes, you'll find reduced poverty and improved livelihood, key interventions including expanding the basket of essential food items exempted from VAT, undertaking a review of administered pricing to see where there are opportunities to reduce costs for citizens, but returning also all passenger rail, recovery of all passenger rail corridors that have been disrupted through over the past 5 years or so, sometimes also during the close down, the lockdown of the COVID-19, accelerating land reforms, prioritizing the transfer of state land, and improve the what is called the post-settlement support for those people that are beneficiaries of land reform. They should receive better support to sustain economic activities. Also, the use of social relief of distress as a basis for sustainable form of income support for the unemployed. Then in the next slide, we'll see priorities around outcomes for affordable quality healthcare, which includes implementation of the NHI, strengthening the primary healthcare and improving the quality of healthcare at all levels, and also attention to be paid on to optimizing human resources and healthcare infrastructure, as well as implementing a single electronic health record as part of the digital transformation in the public sector. Education, a big area in terms of expanding and mass registration of ECD facilities, early childhood development, interventions to improve outcomes for reading and learning, and expanding the vocational and training institutions, training to make sure that skills are relevant for the economy. In the next slide, matters relating to social cohesion, protecting languages and cultures, promoting sports, arts and culture, but also promoting the involvement of all key stakeholders across society on the life of our country and its advancement, making sure that no one is left behind. Under priority 3, this is very important because how government works can determine the outcomes that can be achieved. So there's a need to improve the delivery of basic services and bringing stability to the local government. And local government, as I've said, is one of the key areas for Operation Vulindlela interventions in the next a wave that has been launched last week. Then issues of disaster management capabilities, strengthening disaster management capabilities and responsiveness and readiness, improvement of the governance of the public, implementation of the Presidential State-Owned Enterprises Council recommendations to improve governance of public entities and ensuring that they have the right kind of developmental impact by introducing this centralized ownership model, including the strengthening of SARS, rebuilding capabilities of the state and creating a public, a professional public service. It's very, very important. Then we'll skip and go to the next slide around strengthening law enforcement agencies to address crime and corruption. This is an area that impacts directly on confidence of investors and of citizens, that people must feel safe to adequately contribute or participate in social life. Here, the continuation of implementation of the integrated crime and violence prevention strategy, improving the use of technology in the crime fighting and detection. Also, attention being paid to implementing the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence, the key interventions there, and dealing with anti-money laundering and terrorism financing threats are also the focus areas. Then promoting peace, stability, and development in Africa and globally, a whole range of activities around how South Africa positions itself in terms of taking certain positions internationally, and as well as the important space of hosting of the G20 this year, and how South Africa actually derives outcomes, economic outcomes, socio-economic outcomes from these engagements. One thing that's happening now, it interfaces directly with the process of budget. The presentation of the budget 3.0, as it would be called, impacts directly on the timeframes that are reflected here. But important principles is that all government departments and provinces across government plans must align with the MTDP. And also they must address key interventions that were announced in the State of the Nation address, as well as those that have been announced in the State of the Province address. It's important. Now, how DPME evaluations supports the work of this committee? It's in various ways. The overriding statement I will make here, without going through the whole set of content here, is that there is a national evaluation policy framework that the department administers. It sets standards for evaluation across the country. We use it to coordinate evaluations that are done both by the DPME, by other departments, and in provinces to make sure that they are intended for use in improving government work and decision making, including also how budget decisions, importantly. So the committee can invite the DPME to present or brief it on any of the evaluations, because each evaluation takes a deep dive on a particular issue that is being evaluated. And there are certain recommendations that are made in there. Important is that key recommendations arising from that must find expression in improvement actions that are implemented by relevant departments. We are currently reviewing this National Evaluation Policy Framework, and we would appreciate an opportunity also, if the committee wishes, to interface with the committee so that in updating this policy, the expectations of the committee can then be taken on board. We have shared the same kind of a request or recommendation with the Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation Portfolio Committee. So it is important for evaluations to generate evidence that can be used. So there must be demand for evaluations. Something that we are doing to make sure that members of parliament interface with this process of evaluations in a way that can also be mutually beneficial in terms of giving us feedback on what works and us providing relevant content for members to perform the oversight work. There is a training program that we have proposed through the Portfolio Committee on Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation on monitoring and evaluation, which then involves an aspect of peer learning with other African countries. So that program, which is going to run towards the end of May, will provide a whole lot of information around the tools that we use and how those can interface with the work of the committee. I will skip some of these slides. Important is to highlight that in slide number 33, we have listed some of the recently completed evaluations, those that are completed in the sixth administration, and some of these implementation of improvement plans is still underway. And it is useful to also note that some of the key recommendations arising from this have found expression in the MTDP and also into APPs of some department. But we still have concerns that certain important evaluation recommendations that have been produced from this have not actually been acted upon, which I think the DPME and the committee can work together to ensure that some of these things are attended to. In the framework for assessing expenditure, this is the proposal that DPME is still working on. It's an area that we want to strengthen. We are developing or finalizing a framework to guide assessment of expenditure against performance. This is to respond to a growing interest, including by this committee, in how public funds are used to produce outputs, how we link those outputs to outcomes and the impact they should have in society. So it is important for us to understand that relationship between expenditure and performance, especially now given the context of constrained fiscal space and many competing national priorities. So that's why we are scaling up our activities in this area, building on to what has been done already. The spending reviews that are conducted by the National Treasury, they serve as an important source of evidence and also practice in terms of how can we enhance this, especially around how we can enhance the use of the evidence generated through this process to inform decisions and responsiveness and agility in the way we do things in government. So this is not only an interest in South Africa, but we see same kind of interest in OECD member states. There's a committee on called the Network of Senior Budget Officials that exchange practices and knowledge around strengthening the link between budgetary governance and performance management so as to align the spending and performance outcomes. So there's a number of steps involved, which we have outlined in this slide, starting with the internal analysis, but also how we understand the logic in terms of how outcomes are translated into outputs and outcomes and impacts, as well as the indicators that are used in doing so, how we'll understand the expenditure performance against those indicators. And then it's important that this process produces actionable recommendations and can enforce improvement actions that can be tracked. So that there is already work that happens between the DPME and the National Treasury. One of the tools that DPME has actually used is the budget prioritization framework, which is currently being updated to make sure that sometimes what is planned, there's too many actions and too much demand for budget resources compared to the available budget. So this tool is useful for that purpose, to help interface between the DPME and the National Treasury around the engagements in aligning the plans and the budget. In conclusion, this is the last slide. It is recommended that the committee notes the briefing. Just the parting shots, the strong alignment between MTDP and budget is crucial to ensure that resources are targeted at priorities, and mechanism for strengthening assessment of expenditure against budget and how evidence is generated from that should be used to effect improvement. And that is very, very important. It is also important to note that what we are doing, or what is being proposed to be done by the DPME, builds on existing mechanisms, lessons that we picked up from there. And it's important to build strategic partnerships and collaboration with social partners to build the support necessary for effective implementation of the MTDP. And the final documents on the MTDP are also accessible in the links that are shown on the screen. Thank you very much, and back to you, DG.
Thanks, DG. Chairperson, with your permission, this concludes our presentation, and we are now ready to engage with the committee. Thank you.
Can I then recognize honorable members of the committee who want to raise some questions? I know I have a number myself. I want to recognize on the platform Honorable Molefe. I think it is Honorable Waitlin. So Molefe, Waitlin, Kale Kamazibugo, Honorable Mkonto. I think that pretty much are the 4 members that are on the platform. So with that, let me start with you, Honorable Molefe. You can proceed.
Thank you, Chairperson. I have a few questions. Firstly, just as a starting point, what happened to the National Development Plan? Was it evaluated? What is its status at the moment? Because a lot of the National Development Plan targets were not achieved, especially related to employment and economic growth. So what happened to the NDP? Was it evaluated? What is government's plan with the NDP? And now that we're doing the MTDP, I want to find out from the presenter whether the budget 3.0 that we're going to receive next week is based on is informed by the MTDP. Can we be assured that budget 3.0 will be aligned with the MTDP? And then thirdly, optimizing employment programs. In slide 15, how is this consistent with the removal of people from the public works employment program of people who are above 55 years old? And how does this optimize the employment programs? And if it isn't, what is the plan to align what is being said now and what government is actually doing? And then if I can get a comment on long-term energy security and the just energy transition. How is the just energy transition consistent with long-term energy, with a long-term energy plan or long-term energy security of the country? Because we know that what the just energy transition is propagating is not in line with long-term energy security, especially that it includes closing down power stations, coal power stations, and introducing wind and solar, which are not tested and which are not reliable. So how is that consistent with long-term energy security. I still have some other questions, Chair, but I will introduce. I will wait for my second bite.
Thank you, Honorable Molefe. Honorable Wakelin.
Good morning, Chair. I'm going to I'm just showing my face. Did you see that I am here? My signal is not so great, so if I may just present audible or just audio, if you allow me. Chair, just a few things. The first one, it relates to we have heard that the wage negotiations has far outstripped the growth, the inflation on year basis for many years now. And I would like to know if the DPME has got a plan with regards to start looking at the whole matter around wage negotiations and the increase of salaries, and how we're going to rectify that situation. As it stands at the moment, we saw a graph yesterday, which was horrifying. And I'm sure that DPME is aware of that, and what are they going to do to address that matter? Because we're at the situation now where you would find that people working for government earns far greater salaries than those in the private sector. And then the second part to that question is, and we saw the submission, although this submission was around the budget itself, I have seen very little around the matter around performance management and the implementation of performance strategies as far as government employees are concerned. What is the plans there? Because we need to start get people to work at least a good, decent 8 hours a day. As the sense I get at the moment is that it's not, and how effectively that is monitored, I think that is the more important question. Then thirdly, the Chair, is the matter that relates to EPWP. My previous colleague raised the matter of EPWP. My concern around EPWP is the sustainability of the project. Whereas, and me coming from a local government background can tell you that the effectiveness of the EPWP program is horrific in that a few matters. One, obviously with regards to skills transfer and as a stepping stone for people to seek employment, which is not happening on the ground. Two, that effective work to be done and monitoring and ensuring that the outcomes of EPWP is actually arriving at its intended objectives is to enable people to become fully employed in whatever sector they want to be in. The concern is that at the moment, EPWP is not effectively used, and we would like to know what the intervention plans are going to be around that, given the amount of money we spend there. I think I'll stop there for now, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Wakelin. Honorable Galega Mazibuko.
Thank you very much. I have a few questions on the issue of the private sector and the role of government to enable the private sector to create jobs. You know, there are many private sector companies in the country that are not necessarily creating jobs to South Africans. So what is the role of the DPME in that regard? And if it is not the responsibility of the DPME to monitor and raise such issues, so whose responsibility is it? So that maybe as a committee we can know who is responsible to tackle this problem, because we have a lot of companies that are in the country and they are generating a lot of money. They have big businesses, but they are not helping the country in terms of the creation of employment opportunities. And then the other one is the presenter spoke about the training that can also benefit the committee. I would like to know how can the committee benefit in the training of the M&E, because I think the committee needs more capacitation in terms of monitoring and evaluation as part of our role. And then my last question is that the National Treasury Chair is currently considering the introduction of fiscal rule, which aims to address the budget deficits and the increasing debt to GDP ratio, as well as the implementation of this fiscal rule. So the implementation of this fiscal rule is likely to come at the expense of programs that are vital for economic expansion, for employment creation and poverty reduction. So in light of this reality, Chair, how will the DPME then ensure that the National Treasury's proposal for a fiscal rule does not undermine the government's ability to achieve the MTDP targets and lead to a counterproductive economic contraction that makes debt servicing more difficult in a long term? Those were my questions for now, Chair.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Honorable Kgaleka Mazibu. Honorable Mkhonto.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, Chair, to you, honorable members and our colleagues and guests. Chair, I have few questions for this department, for the presenter. First of all, let me welcome the presentation. Chair, we all know that the President of the Republic has performance agreements with ministers. My question is, does this department contribute to the presidency's evaluation of ministers' performance with their data that they collect during their evaluations? Secondly, how frequent do this department do evaluations in their area of jurisdiction? And Chair, I don't get the sense of accountability. If we can be given as to how many departments underperformed during the 2024-2025 financial year, and how did they underperform, including those that returned funds to the National Treasury because they couldn't spend. Because, Chair, we can't say we want to improve the livelihoods of our people if we having ministers that are returning funds or doing fiscal dumping, but do not deliver services to our people. The last one, Chair, is the silence of our government and the relevant departments against those that are spreading genocide propaganda about our country. In their strategic objectives, they said they also monitor and evaluate with regard to peace and security. The citizens of this country, they feel that their security is compromised. So what is being done to make sure that the relevant departments are able to protect the citizens of this country? According to this department, are they doing enough? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Mkhonto. I have a number of questions that I wanted to put forward. The first is, I want to welcome the presentation and the medium-term development plan, but equally so caution and perhaps maybe put this question up front, that I get the impression that this department, whilst it does not have, if you like, there's a question of how do we ensure that other inputs that have to go into making the plan realizable are lagging behind, which makes your work near impossible. So let me give you a real example. There are some legislations that are already being delayed For example, you can raise in your strategic plan to say that you want to build a capable local government, for argument's sake. But if the white paper on local government is being delayed over the decades that it has, you might as well just pontificate on your ambition, but you will have no capability of being able to do anything about it. For example, there's a review. There's been a continuous discussion about a review on the equitable share formula. Now, you can say all you like about you want to see a capable local government or provincial government. You can say all of those things, state capability, etc. But the reality is, if that equitable share formula is not updated, budget will follow the outdated model, and therefore, by net effect, the views that are expressed in the documents then become poor. So, or become unrealizable. And I think I speak for the broader theme that says that South Africa is finding itself in a state where pronouncements are not aligned to legislation. And at times, whatever the legislation is, as the high-level panel report by former President Motlanthe says, that in fact, in truth, we simply cannot fund for legislation. And I think that is a risk that the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation faces up to. And I'd like to get your views on that. The second is, in being able to compile the plan, I appreciate the roadmap you took us on, some of the consulting, if you like, data points that you went through. But I'd like to get, perhaps maybe I missed it, but Treasury does its own research on, particularly in being able to put forward the outer year plan. Now, these speak to population growth. Have you got a presentation that perhaps speaks to population growth models? Because if you are planning and you make the point that you want to move towards planning beyond 2030, there must be some assumptions upon which you are building on as to what the population growth is going to look like. There must be some assumptions that you base that says that actually it's fine to say you want to strengthen education by introducing ECD centers, but what happens in a universe where there's negative population growth? Or it's fortunately not a problem we will encounter for now, but what happens in that? But consistent with that point, I use one example of children. We know that if the population is aging, there are other healthcare considerations that will go into space in that regard. So policies such as NHI will matter. But I also want, in understanding the population demography or demographics thereof, whether there's a genuine consideration around what we do around immigration law, because that poses a particular planning outlook when you look at your strategic objective of keeping peace and stability in the region. It's one to look at it as it speaks to conflict, but it's quite another conversation to think about it as it speaks to what happens to immigration. And already South Africa is facing some of that, because that means it will have other implications going forward. I think other members have covered me on the question of the inputs of the private sector as it speaks to this. Whilst this is a planning for a society and what government's inputs are, but I think an envisaged view that says that the 5-point-odd, just under 6 trillion rand economy, how does it achieve and work in conjunction to achieve some of the developmental objectives that are laid out in the medium term, and how we go? Because in part, the National Development Plan had envisaged some of that work going forward. So what I want to understand is that maybe Honorable Molefe asked the question, what happens to the NDP? I want to say, fine, given the NDP, and I want to understand the inputs of the Planning Commission. You said there were consulting views that came into that. I really want to understand the depth of saying, how do you align it better, because already it's common cause that when it comes to APPs or the annual performance plans, departments are on average sitting at below half of those being achieved. So how do we then ensure, and maybe this is a self-reflection question, this portfolio committee, Parliament itself, we are not here to ask us to do our job. Of course, it is for us to hold people accountable for missing those targets, but perhaps maybe you might give some hints as to why some of those targets are not being achieved, why some of the issues that are not there. Now, the third question I want to put in, perhaps maybe this speaks to the Deputy Minister. We are living in a different universe. I think for the foreseeable future, at least for the next 2 electoral cycles, we do not anticipate a one-party majority. It is common cause. You introduced the notion of politics in the presentation by saying the original input was from the statement of intent, which in essence is a political document. So now I want to understand, when you depart from that point of view, this is perhaps an input rather than a question. I think the DPME needs to be capacitated to give capacity to political parties. And why I say capacitating political parties is because when political parties draft manifestos, they do all sorts of weird and wonderful things. The reality is they arrive in Parliament, you craft a statement of intent. This movie will be repeated again in 2029, and it will be a movie in local municipalities in 2026. They arrive. Now, if a party does not have capacity to give input to your planning cycle, you can appreciate that in a coalition environment, those parties can sway the balance of power, which could really, in all fairness, impact the broader developmental agenda. In fact, if I was to give a critique, perhaps maybe of the GNU, is that some of the decision-making, whilst may have departed from the statement of intent, some of them did not achieve the sort of cohesive planning, budgeting, and the work that you are describing. So much so that in the absence of buy-in, you end up with budgets being delayed in 3 cycles, inherently because there isn't a buy-in in the broader planning aspect of the issue, or there's a disagreement in the broader planning of the issue. So if there is that, you cannot then fund a budget, pass it, hold it to account, and implement it. So perhaps maybe to a Deputy Minister to understand whether there's enough thinking about how we strengthen political parties. How do we capacitate? Because you can professionalize the state, but if you don't have a professional political, economic view or planning view, you will really arrive with populists capturing the intent bit. And if they hold the balance of power, it means your developmental mechanism cannot be achieved, however way you might think of it. And perhaps maybe there's a lesson here to learn from the US, but I'm not going to get into that. But what I'm trying to allude to is, let's professionalize the politics, but also professionalize the politicians. Because sometimes in holding the evaluatory mechanisms, you end up with, I hate calling people bureaucrats, but professional staff, and I see this typically in municipalities, being held by a professional, a political class that does not interface with the data points. And the net consequence of that is that you end up with, if you like, the tail wagging the dog rather than the other way around. Lastly, I really do think I would have hoped, and I want to understand what the mandate of the Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation Department, as it speaks to some of the choice metrics. You raise SRD. Now, there's a debate. Should the SRD become a basic income grant? You are putting it as part of the medium-term development plan. There's a school of thought that argues perhaps in cutting the budget, that must be removed. Or if it does get included, it must be a basic income grant. Now, this debate, what is the department's input in the decision-making matrix? I'm not suggesting one way or another. I'm merely asking you can make decisions, because you raise correctly the spending reviews. Now, spending reviews done by GTEC mean one thing, but when it comes to executive power and function, some of those reviews have got impact into some of the overall macro plan that you've put. You raise correctly stability in the continent, and in your slide, when you talk about pursuing peace, stability, and development in Africa and globally, I think all of us are now conscious of the pace at which things change and the geopolitical opportunities that are there. Now, how much impact and input are you putting in questions of climate change, US-China relations, some of the global wars that are taking place, and perhaps the global wars not just only being in violent, whether it's Russia, Ukraine, whether it's Israel, Palestine, but it's also the tariff wars that are starting to come on board, and whether there is enough resilient planning as to how we safeguard. It's one thing to pursue peace, stability, but what about economic insulation as it speaks to Africa itself, not isolation? There's a difference between insulation and isolation. I suppose I'm trying to refer to insulation as it speaks to the headwinds that are coming, not only in the short term of 4 years in President Trump's presidency, but in the next 10 years. I think that we're going to make instability the new normal rather than stability or predictability. Instability, and certainly living in a universe where there's constant change, will be the new normal, rather than saying we want to long for a world where you can do strategic planning with variables that are consistent over 5 years. I think there needs to be much better strategic thinking with variables that are constantly changing. So I want to understand from the department how much thinking has gone into that piece of work, because what is presented in the slide almost is rote, if I could say it like that. Let me pause it there and then take your responses, DG and the team.
Okay, I take it that the is going to conclude. So let me start, Chair, and will be very quick and straight to the point. Now, let me start quickly with your own issues, the issues that you have raised yourself. One around the delay.
Sorry, TG. Chairperson, Honorable Mwali's hand is up. Sorry to interrupt.
Honorable, no, what we have done, Mr. Makakula, I see Honorable Mwali's hand. If we get a second round, we'll go there. I did take the first round of questions from honorable members. We will return. Honorable Mwali, I note your hand, and we will return to you in the next round if I can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, in terms of the delayed legislation, it is very true that there is legislation that is delayed, and that legislation deals with the professionalization of the public service, first and foremost. And that relates to the Public Service Act and the Public Management Act, which are currently in Parliament. We understand they have gone through the National Assembly, and they are currently at the National Council of Provinces. And we hope that the two laws or amendments are going to be expedited so that we can move with some speed, with some haste in the professionalization of the public service. The white paper on local government is a new intervention. We have been intervening in local government for most of the time, starting with Project Consolidate many years back. And we recognize that while there have been interventions, there is a need now to rethink the whole system of local government, which will also attend to some of the issues that you are raising when it comes to funding. So the white paper has been gazetted for public comment. We are part of the steering committee as a DPMA to ensure that we don't react and just solve problems as they arise, but they have a holistic systemic review of local government. So we are engaging with the relevant department that this work be expedited. We do pay attention to population growth. We meet regularly with State SA, where we seek guidance from them on the implications of the population trends on the work that we are doing as government. And when you read the entire document, the entire MTDP document, we do make reference to this kind of things as part of the planning instruments that need to be considered. And I think together with State SA, we can provide more information on what we see in terms of population growth. Now, on immigration, there are two things that we have been tracking. One is the work of the Border Management Agency, which is fairly a new entity of government and is making some strides, including the use of drones. We have seen videos and reports of how the use of technology is assisting the work of the Border Management Agency. Likewise, SADC has a strategic plan. What we're doing now, we are working with DECO to review that strategic plan of SADC. So SADC has started that process of reviewing the strategic plan, and DPME is providing support to DECO in the evaluation of that strategic plan. Now, this is very important for us so that we don't react to the challenges that come from the region in particular, but we must also be deliberate in terms of the growth strategy of the region. So there's a lot of work that we are doing in that particular area, and we have a cohort of recommendations to make on how South Africa is the biggest economy, need to prioritize a situation whereby we advance growth in other countries. Obviously, they have to do work for themselves, but as the recipient of the problem, we need to be proactive in the way we deal with SADC matters. There is work that has started in government to review the economic strategy of government in support of the MTDP, because the MTDP itself already recognized that we need better coordination when it comes to economic policy. So that work has started, and as part of that, we are going to deal with the challenges that have since emerged at a global level. In the short term, the Minister of DECO is obviously leading with the President to respond to some of the emerging issues, whilst at the same time consolidating the new economic policy and strategic direction. So that work is being done, involving the presidency and the economic cluster. We have a report as DPME called Development Indicators Report, which I would suggest that it serves here once it has been approved by Cabinet. This is our attempt to track the implementation of the National Development Plan. We do this on an annual basis, and we can share with the committee what we see on whether the targets of the NDP will be met or not. Now, the evaluation of the NDP was done during...
Sorry, TG, what was the name of that document again? Just I missed you just there.
Development Indicators Report. So
Thank
this
you.
report focuses on outcomes. So that report is there with a DPME. We can also share prior reports. The National Planning Commission on its own has also produced its own report. Now, here's a catch. During the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, we did an evaluation of the implementation of the NDP. And we found that because we had taken over 500 billion from the implementation of programs to support COVID, we were going to face challenges along the way. Initially, DPME had recommended that we rebase some of the targets of the National Development Plan, but the National Planning Commission did not agree with us and still insisted that we should continue with the National Development Plan. But there were already signs at that point, around 2020, 2021, that we were not going to meet some of the targets because we had rebased them and shifted the budget to support COVID. I'll skip the issue around the support for political parties, at least from a political point of view, but safe to say that on our side, when it comes to information, the information at our disposal that we can release publicly to parties, we can always do so that parties can benefit from the work that we do, as this is public information. I've said that on the tariff wars, there are things that have been done, led by the president and others in cabinet, whilst we are waiting for the review of the strategy. And I think the relevant briefing can be done. Quickly on the issues raised by Honorable Mulife, I think I've already dealt with the issue around the evaluation of the NDP. Just to emphasize that, yes, we do that. We track the implementation or the pursuit of the various targets of the MTDP and of the NDP, I mean, and the reports can always be shared with the committee. The expectation is that the budget should speak to the MTDP as it is the current plan of government. Fortunate enough, the DPME sits in the budget committees and we are allowed to make inputs there. So it would be inconceivable that we can have a budget that says nothing or does not speak to the plan. So that is our understanding. On the issue of people who are over 65 and they currently beneficiaries of the EPWP, we have engaged with the department. We've had preliminary engagements with the Department of Cooperative Governance. Our understanding is that the department is saying that these people, most of them or some of them, they are already on the social safety net. They receive social grants. So you have a situation.
Sorry, Chair, it is people over 55, not 65. Over 55. They're
Yes.
not yet 60, and so they're not on the safety net.
Yes, those ones, the ones who are under 55, there are negotiations going on with respect to that. But those who are above 65, obviously, they will be covered with the social safety net. Then the long-term energy plan, the government policy or articulation has been very clear and pointed to say that we want to deal with this issue of energy transition in the context of our own country, so that we must not disadvantage ourselves. So whilst all of us agree that there is a need to take technologies, new emerging technologies and innovation, at the same time, we need to ensure that we don't disadvantage ourselves. And that has been stated even by the president, as far as we've been following his own articulation with respect to this matter. So DPME as a department will make similar recommendations that whatever we do in this area, it must be such that it's based on our own objective realities to address our own needs and challenges as we face them. Then to Honorable Wakilin, I hope I pronounced that correctly, that on the wage negotiations, this is obviously a sticky point, and we are equally concerned about it, but it's a double-edged sword, and I would suggest that on this one, we get DPSA to join us perhaps in the next engagement so that they can give more in-depth engagement. I must indicate that ourselves and DPSA are conveners of the governance cluster. So from time to time, they present on this and we make our own inputs. But Chair, this is a very big issue that I would suggest that when we deal with it, we come back maybe with the Treasury and DPSA so that we can give you a 360-degree perspective on that. On the performance management system, DPME is responsible for the management of the performance management system of the heads of government, that is DGs. Last year, we presented a report to our portfolio committee on the state of performance and whether DGs had performance agreements, whether they were assessed. And I would say that by and large, most DGs at the time had their own performance agreements and were being assessed. There were areas where DGs were not fully assessed. And we have been making follow-ups to ensure that there is maximum compliance in ensuring that the HODs are assessed. We have noted that there is a need for reforms in the implementation of the performance management system. And that includes a situation whereby the performance management system of DGs currently does not reflect outcomes. It's largely on the output at the output level, and there is a need for that to be addressed. With respect to the performance agreements for ministers, we play a supportive role as the DPME. We support the president in identifying issues or matters that should be included in the performance agreements. And also during the assessment by the president, we sit there and do our own assessment. So we will then look at the work of the departments, the performance of departments and other indicators, compile them, send them to the relevant ministers to comment, as a performance assessment is also a two-way process. And once we're done with that, we then submit to the president and we leave it to the president to engage with the ministers. Previously, we even published the performance agreements with the exception of that of state security on the website of government. I wish to believe that they are still there. Then the role of the private sector and the challenges of not employing in South Africans. There are three issues that have been done with respect to that. One is the JCPS, to say that the JCPS, this is the security cluster, must do its work. It must do its work to make sure that there is maximum compliance in the country and not only intervene when there are complaints. So this is one issue that the JCPS has been dealing with on their side. The cluster, the economic cluster, started some programs, including the registration of spaza shops. And this was an attempt to create a database so that we can know who is doing what where. We're seeing now also the metros doing some work, because that's where we face a big challenge, Chair, that there is a poor implementation of bylaws in the country. And we see most of the metros is struggling with the implementation of bylaws. But in the last few weeks, we've seen some activity in Johannesburg, where as part of that, they've targeted people who are doing deliveries, the Uber-related deliveries. And there you find that many people who are employed there are foreigners. So there is that work. We have not done a detailed, in-depth evaluation, but this is a matter that the metros are dealing with. DG Mashamba will deal with the training of the committee on M&E-related areas, but also to recommend some areas for training. On the fiscal rules, I will ask Lindsay Martin to talk about that. Let me conclude, Chair, in terms of the other work that we do that may be pertinent for this committee. So, Chair, we receive draft APPs of around 40 departments, including some of the entities. There are some of the organizations that promote constitutional democracy that also submit their draft APPs to us. Some of the provinces also give us their draft APPs. So what we do, when we get the draft APPs from all these entities that I've referred to, we analyze them, make our own inputs, and at the end, compile a report. So currently, as I speak, Chair, there is a report that can be presented to yourselves, and that report will show our analysis of what is contained in the APPs of all departments, all national government departments, some of the provinces that we deal with, some of the organizations that promote constitutional democracy. Now, that can be a foundation of our annual interaction between ourselves and yourselves, because that will give you a baseline on the extent to which departments are planning and what it is that they are planning to do. So that work can be done. On the return of funds, I must say that there is currently no consequence management on the return of funds between ourselves and Treasury. We have not put an instrument. There was a suggestion that departments that don't spend, in the form of zero-based budgeting, the money should not be taken away, and then we must move on, and the departments should not be allowed to claim the same money going forward. This is still a matter for debate. I must admit that on our side, we have not done this up to now, but as you saw in the last slides, as the DG Mashamba was presenting, there are things that we are trying to do to enter the fray, working with National Treasury on budget analysis and alignment. So that work is going to be done. Then lastly, on the genocide propaganda in South Africa, we have seen our colleagues in the security services taking active interest on the spread of propaganda that there is genocide going on in South Africa, whilst that's not the case. And we know that the security services are attending to this by way of even petitioning the courts, taking on the organizations and individuals who are spreading a falsehood against our own country. But I'd rather the briefing be done by JCPS at the opportune time, because that has material economic impact. So I'll leave it at that. But I can say without any fear of contradiction that there is work that is being done by the JCPS cluster. Let me quickly ask DDG Mashamba to deal with one issue related to evaluations. And then we have Lindsay Martin is going to comment on fiscal rules. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. The training is called the Parliamentary Capacity Building Workshop. It's something that South Africa has been doing with the movement called Twendembele. Twendembele in Kiswahili means moving forward together. It's a peer learning platform that South Africa runs with 6 other African countries and other partners in that space to learn and and empower governments on M&E practices. So the training was requested by the Portfolio Committee of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation, I think somewhere in October last year. So we have put together a program which is going to be delivered in 3 slots of 2 days, or 3 or 2 days. The first one is 3 days, 29 to 31 May. We are awaiting a list of members of Parliament South Africa who have confirmed. Our liaison is with the Secretariat of the PME committee. We have requested them to contact chairs of other committees who might be interested. So we can communicate with the Secretariat if there is interest in this committee.
Okay, Mr. Martin, please intervene quickly on your side on the fiscal rules.
Thank you, DG. The issue of fiscal rules or anchors, it was presented to Cabinet during January this year. There was discussion and debate whether we should actually implement fiscal rules. There was consensus that if we do implement fiscal rules, it will actually stop us from responding to any shocks that might happen to our country. So the example they gave was COVID-19. Should have there been fiscal rules implemented then we wouldn't have the ability to actually respond to that shock. So, I mean, given that the Trump administration is also presenting new programs, having fiscal rules will actually impede us from responding appropriately. So the consensus from Cabinet was, for now, we're not going to implement any fiscal rules or anchors just to give our country the ability to respond to any shocks that might hit the economy. Other discussions related to that was this, the expenditure for the different sectors of the economy. For example, for the social sector, we do spend around 60% of the budget for that, and not much for the economic sector. But now we saw the release of the Operation Vulandlela program, and almost close to R1 trillion has been committed for the economic sector. So there again, we can see the linkages between the approved MTDP and what is being made announcements in the proposed budget that we're going to see coming forward. Thank you, DG.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels. Chair, that will conclude our administrative part. As indicated, we didn't respond to the political question because it was directed to the political leadership. Thank you.
Thanks, DG, and thanks, Chairperson, once again. And I must say that the questions that are raised by committee members are quite probing questions that we in no way should not treat them as once off, but shaping also how our our department should relate to these very strategic issues that has been posed here. So it helps to be much more pointed when we relate to the rest of other government departments. Chair, I think it's rather a difficult one, but I believe that the observations could be correct, that maybe the nature of politics in South Africa is changing, but well, of course, it's subject to evidence as the time goes on. I do believe that politics, by their very nature, is an exercise of power based on the interest of different constituencies that political parties serve or represent. And the South African context provides for an environment of a healthy engagement, and also the nature of democracy that we have chosen in South Africa, that of constitutional democracy. It sets the context within which parties have to relate. I believe it is natural that there could be conflicting interest on a number of issues, but political maturity requires that when all agreements made, decisions had to be taken in the interest of broader public. So we have to acknowledge what are inherent differences between parties, but of course, ensure that the broader framework, which in this instance, that one of the GNU provides for a mechanism for parties that are in the GNU to can deal with the issues. We will avoid to over-regulate a political space, running the risk of what could be termed as elitism. But we have got to ensure that elements of establishing government with agreeable parties was the intention, of course, that we should have a more frank, open space to discuss, and the unity of purpose, professional and legal and ethical conduct has got to be cultivated for the country to move forward. So I believe that the current framework did anticipate disagreements, but of course, we have got a constitution which sets out the framework of how we should engage. And I believe that through constant engagement, the national interest should prevail. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. Can I recognize and just a last round of questions, the quick, brief questions of clarity, Honorable Mwali, Honorable Mulefe, and then I think we'll park it there. I don't see any other members. Let me hand over to those two members, quick shot.
Thank you so much, Chair. I've been largely covered by members who asked questions and from the answers from the department. But I want to make these remarks, Chair, that this is a slap to the faces of many South Africans who are living in poverty. That we have a situation where there's discussions about keeping the budget that was supposed to have been spent, that was returned to treasury. You know, if we have so many people in this country that are living in poverty or in utter poverty, and our government lacks the political will to do the correct thing, which is to serve the people, which is the mandate of this government. So really, if I hear from the DG that there is this, though there are still discussions as to how they're going to handle the issue of the monies or the budget that needs to be returned back to treasury. Really, at this point, we can't be having that discussion because people out there are struggling and they are living in situations where you can't even think how they survive. Number two, Chair, before I shoot straight to these two questions, let me just ask these two questions, Chair. I wish that the department puts us into confidence as to whose interests are being prioritized in this medium-term development plan. How does it address the needs and the concerns of the different stakeholders, including our marginalized people and communities? Number two, Chairperson, how does this plan aligns with the broader national and international development goals, such as sustainable development goals, and what are the implications of development citizenships and cooperation? Let me end there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Member. Honorable Molefe.
Thank you, Chair. I was disturbed to learn on slide 19 that one of our targeted education outcomes is to get our children to read by grade 4. Surely that must be the most basic outcome that doesn't even require mention. It must be a standard that should be met without elevating it to a discussion in Parliament, in a committee, in an August committee such as this one. What about the skills that are needed by the economy? The skills for science, for mathematics, for technology, and for the fourth industrial revolution. What about making those the outcomes of our education system? What about being more ambitious rather than just targeting making children to read by grade 4? I mean, most of us, even with Bantu education, could read by standard 2. So that is not something that we should be setting as a target for a medium-term development plan as important as this one in this juncture of our history. Secondly, the slide 20 talks about the promotion of language and culture. How do you reconcile this with Orania and Kleinfontein? Because there, the Afrikaners are saying that they are also promoting their own language and culture. And it was disturbing to notice that quite a number of the members of the GNU actually support that view, support the fact that Orania and Kleinfontein, as small racist enclaves within South Africa, should continue to exist under the pretext of language and culture. Now, in the medium-term development plan, how do you plan to deal with that contradiction? And then the centralized ownership model for SOEs. Firstly, I mean, if we can get an update on the passage of the legislation, but and maybe this is putting the horse before the cart, but how will the centralized model be different, and how will it improve the outcomes of the SOEs? It feels like shifting the deck chairs while the Titanic is sinking. So what we're doing is we're removing ESCOM from Department of Public Enterprises to Department of Energy to Department of the Presidency, but we do not talk about the fundamentals work, the fundamental work that needs to be done to give us long-term energy security, the substance of what they are supposed to do. And then finally on slide 25, there was talk about building state capacity through PPPs. Now, I don't know if PPPs are the best way or the only way, because I did not see any other way that was mentioned of building state capacity. I understand state capacity to mean that we have, or at least we still have the intention of building a developmental state that focuses on development, that focuses on growth, that focuses on employment and eradication of poverty and inequality. A developmental state that is interventionist in the way that it deals with poverty, inequality, and unemployment. But are public-private partnerships the best way to deal with unemployment, poverty, and inequality? Are there other ways in which the state's capacity to deal with the three evils that are taking South Africa at the moment is PPPs the only way that we can deal with these things? And after all, the private sector that we talk about in South Africa at the moment that the state wants to go into partnership with is largely an untransformed private sector. So how does that contradiction work out in the way that we intend to do the planning? And let me acknowledge, Chairperson, my long-standing colleague, the Director General of the department, Chabisek. Welcome, and it's good to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Molefe. I think let me allow the DG to respond, and perhaps I wanted to ask a question about special economic zones because those have been in place for a while. Is there a report that looks at, and perhaps I'll put this as a written request if there is one, if you can give me an indicator whether if there's a response about their efficacy or lack of efficacy. And the question is led really about whether we need to declare more areas special economic zones or less, considering the apartheid spatial network around economic nodes in the country. And so I wanted to establish whether or not we could really rethink where we position special economic zones rather than it being in Kucha. But I wonder if the historical apartheid legacy ones, townships, could be declared as such so as to direct in economic investment there. It helps not only with where people work, but it also where they live and they play, which could help deal with some of the multidimensional poverty question of the pain of paying too much money to get to places of work or hospitals or any of the other services in a multidimensional poverty lens. So DG, let me allow you to respond to those, and then we will wrap it.
Okay, no, thanks, Chair. Let me also acknowledge my big brother there, Honorable Molefe. I didn't want to disclose that I know people in higher places. Otherwise, the questions become more and more difficult.
May I ask if we can, if this becomes a family reunion, if we could align it as such, and then we'll retitle the meeting.
So, Chair, let me start with your questions. Yes, Chair, we have done monitoring of the SEZ, but what you are referring to are also industrial parks. In practical, all the 9 homelands, there were industrial parks that still exist to this day. We have been doing work in that space. A lot needs to be done 30 years later to get them functioning optimally. So, Chair, we can give you a report that speaks to the SEZ, what we've seen, but also what we've seen in the industrial parks that were established during the homeland era. So we'll do that. Then, Honorable Mwale, the issue of consequence management is a very big deal for us as DPME. We only deal with it at the performance management level, where we ensure that those who are not performing obviously get penalized. But I must be honest to say that we have not looked at things from the money side of things, because we just take it that if you have not performed, if you have not delivered a project, then it means you don't deserve recognition in terms of the performance management system. So maybe this should be a matter of continuous engagement as to whether beyond just using the performance management system, there are other mechanisms that we can use to deal with consequence management for unspent money. So we'll look into that. And in our next report, we'll then indicate after consulting with others who also deal with performance. Then on Honorable Molefe, we agree with you on the skills for the economy. And one of the things that we say in the MTDP is around that of the SITAs, where young people will get learnerships, but only to come to Johannesburg. So if you're in a rural area, you get learnerships, and you come to Johannesburg to look for a job. So there is no pathway that allows young people who have been supported through the SITAs to get jobs or start their own jobs. We are facilitating some engagement in this particular area because we are equally concerned about it. The same also with NSFAS, whether what NSFAS thus is aligned to the economy. There's some preliminary work that we've done with regard to that, given the kind of expenditure that we see every day. Then on the issue of language and culture, we have not dealt with Orania, but in Clayfontaine, we do speak in the MTDP around social cohesion and what needs to be done with regard to social cohesion. So broadly speaking, we encourage everyone, and everyone should be supported to promote their language. But the constitution and the laws are very clear around the issues of undue preference and discrimination against others. But more specifically, DPME has not dealt with the issue of Orania, other than that we need to promote a language. Then lastly, on the SOCs, the matter is, the jury is still out. The matter is out for discussion, where we are raising pertinent questions as to how to make these tools, the SOCs, efficient. In fact, now we are expanding the discourse beyond the SOCs to talk also about the SOEs, the state-owned entities. So there is a report at DPME that deals with state-owned entities beyond the 7 companies that used to be under DPE. So the gist of everything is what model will work. We have put for discussion some ideas on what will work. And when we come to Parliament, we'll then have to articulate our own views on the model that we are suggesting. But we already see from what is being said in public that there will be many views around this matter of SOCs. But we are ready to come to Parliament to explain our own understanding of how best we can work on this. There are many recommendations that have been advanced by the PSEC, the Presidential SOE Council, which allow us to also do a lot of work now, even before the finalization of the bill. So what we are committing to do is the report that we have that can give you a global view of the state of things as far as state-owned entities broadly are faring in terms of the work that needs to be done. Certainly, the PPP model is not the only way to advance the capacity of the state. We know that Treasury has issued regulations that will become effective from the 1st of June with respect to the capacity of the state, with respect to PPPs. It is said in South Africa that the economy, and I think Chair, you are the one who said this, is about 6 trillion. And the state, in its fiscal sense, has maybe around 2-point-something million. So the thinking in government is that we need to enable the other part to be reinvested into the economy so that as much as we're doing our part, there should be investments. Very lastly, the bills that I referred to that are at the NCOP that came from the last administration exactly speak of other measures that are required to strengthen the developmental state. So we are concerned ourselves that the bills have not been finalized, and we'll count on yourselves as honorable members to assist us so that we deal with the other aspects of professionalization that are contained in that bill, in those bills, and likewise in the white paper on local government. Thank you.
DG, let me give expression and a thanks to you and the team for the presentation. I think it was highly appreciated, the depth of the insights that you've brought. And I think what it does allude to is that as the Appropriations Committee, we are going to have to do a lot more work in this in conjunction with your team, certainly on some of the reports you've promised, and I will write formally to you to request some of them. But ultimately, as a committee, we laid out our key objective as not being a committee that just measures post-facto analysis, but asks the questions about performance. And so your slide that looks at how we measure efficacy of not only appropriations, but also programs, policy, and whether they achieve the medium-term developmental goals is certainly something that we have appetite for. It's not just interrogating whether APPs for APP's sake, but if the Department of Education commits itself to saying we have 100 learners who start school and we want to see the majority of them closer to 100 finish matric as part of a developmental indicator, then the committee has a fundamental interest in saying if we appropriate X to the Department of Education, does it achieve that outcome? So I certainly think that the work that we've got to do not only requires our annual engagement, but really a regular interface as we measure ourselves. I always say to somebody, you bring the thermostat that allows us to set the conditions to say this is where the conditions need to be. We will do the thermometer to measure whether are we hitting the right temperatures across the department. So I appreciate the work that you have brought in today, and I appreciate the presentation. Mashile will write on our behalf some of the issues that we wanted to raise and some of the questions that go on from there. Thank you very much, DJ. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Chair and honorable members and DM for the support. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair of the committee, Remaiman.
No. Thank you, Deputy Minister. Thank you. If I can then ask to honorable members of the committee. No, thank you, honorable. Thank you, Dr. Ngobo. Good to see you. I also can say I know people in the department. Thank you, Dr. Ngobo. I will follow on.
Thank you, Chair. My humble apology for earlier mistake.
No problem.
Thank you, Chair. I'm at Dr. Makenete.
No, good to see you. We will engage further. I appreciate.
Thank you, sir.
Good to see Dr. Ngobo as well, Chair. I didn't know he's part of the delegation. Thank you. Good to see Johannesburg person.
No. We can all let's proceed. Honorable members, the next part of the agenda speaks to the adoption of the program for the term. Machine, can I ask you to present that, and just if you can talk into it slightly so that when we look at it, we can members can consider it, and then we can take a view. Just a broad outline, members. We looked at the dictum that says what are the biggest spending departments that the department that can come to portfolio committee so that we hold them to account, the big spends. We took into consideration members' inputs that were spoken about, whether local government and where local government goes in terms of its own points of accountability. So those were considerations in putting together the terms program. And then the last consideration was the input made by Honorable Khanyane that said, how do we give ourselves the breathing space to acknowledge the length of engagement that we will need around budget process given the new order of the day. So those were some of the broad inputs that we put. Mashile, let me hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Chairperson, and good day, honorable members and colleagues on the platform. I assume that I'm audible. The program has been flighted before you. As the Chairperson has already indicated, those are actions that were taken into when we drafted this program. It started, I think, on the 13th, that was Tuesday yesterday, when we had a capacity building workshop with the University of Stellenbosch, to be specific, the Bureau of Economic Research, that dealt with the budget processes and alternative ways to grow the economy. And then it was followed by today's meeting, which is the briefing that we've just had from the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation on the MTDP. Now, the next meeting after this one will be on the 21st, where we'll be having a preparatory session, that is the budget log-up session. The venue would be confirmed, but preliminary indications are that would be meeting at M26. But I confirm that the communication would be circulated in due course. Then after that, we'll be having a briefing a joint briefing with the committees that we normally have, a joint briefing with the standing and select committees on finance and appropriations. That will be on a Friday, where we'll be having a briefing by the minister on the 2025 budget, followed by the meeting on a Tuesday, where we'll be having a briefing from the National Treasury on the two bills, that is the 2025 Division of Revenue Bill, as well as the 2025 Appropriation Bill. You realize that in this instance, we did not put in the ESCOM and the Public Sector Pension Bill because we had an indication lately that bills not be retabled. They would remain as they are. So we continue with a briefing on a Wednesday, which is the 28th, from our client, from PBO. That would be giving a brief on the Division of Revenue Bill, the Appropriation Bill, the ESCOM Debt Relief Amendment Bill, as well as the Public Pension and Related Payments Bill. Then it will be followed by another meeting on the 3rd of June, where we're going to have comments from the FFC on the Division of Revenue Bill, the Appropriation Bill, and the two bills as indicated. Then on the 4th of June, we will have, as usual, the briefing from SALGA on the Division of Revenue Bill, followed by the meeting where we will be having a briefing by ESCOM on the ESCOM Debt Relief Amendment Bill. And on the 11th of June, we will be having the two metros that would be briefing us on the Division of Revenue Bill, I think. That is the Mangaung Metro as well as the Johannesburg Metro. On the Friday, the 13th, we'll be having public hearings on the Division of Revenue Bill, as well as the Public Sector Pension and Related Payments Bill, followed by the departments as we've selected them, as the chairperson has indicated, the briefing by the Department of Health on the 2025 Appropriation Bill, followed by the briefing by the Department of Cooperative Governance on the 18th of June, which will be briefing us on the Appropriation Bill. And on a Friday, 20th, we'll be considering the Division of Revenue Bill as well as the 2025 Public Sector Pensions and Related Payments Bill. We decided that we would have more time, as the chairperson has indicated. So the meeting will be from 9 o'clock to 4 o'clock to be safe. And then a separate application would be made to the office of the House chairperson to grant a permission for us to have that duration granted. Then on the 24th of June, we'll be having a Department of Transport that would be briefing us on the Appropriation Bill, followed by the briefing by the Department of Trade and Industry on the same bill on the 25th of June. Then on the 1st of July, we will be having the Department of Social Development to brief us on the Appropriation Bill. Then the 2nd of July is going to be the public hearings on the 2025 Appropriation Bill, as well as the ESCOM Debt Relief Amendment Bill. Then we intend to have a session on the 15th of July, where we will be having the consideration and adoption of the Appropriation Bill, as well as the ESCOM Debt Amendment Relief Bill. Below are the dates where these discussions are, these bills would be debated in the National Assembly. The Division of Revenue Bill on the 26th of June, then the Appropriation Bill on the 23rd of July. Thank you, Chairperson. Back to you.
Thank you, Mashile. With that consideration of the program, I don't know if any members want to raise anything, or we can move for the adoption of the program as expressed before you. Honorable Wakeling.
Just a matter of clarity, the matter of venue, if it's virtual or physical, can we, as far as possible, start just populating that, because it does confuse all of us. As given that we've got hybrid meetings with Parliament, and all of us are not back to Cape Town, back and forwards. So I would just like us to start aligning with the hybrid meetings. Otherwise, we just find ourselves coming back down for one meeting and have to go back to Joburg again. That's just
Understood, Honorable Member. I always, as a rule, when we have a department come into account, often have a preference for them to be on site, because that helps with the interaction and accountability. Your point is made. Given that Parliament now has to deal with hybrid sessions, we have to deal with those. So almost when we are considering the big reports, generally those will be more physical, but when we have some reports that are from departments, so we will try and do some of them virtually, depending on applications as they go. It's also a cost-saving mechanism. But we will certainly begin to do that work and give members a week's lead time so that for proper planning of flights can make it easy, if that is okay. With that question in mind, may I ask if there's a member who will move for the adoption of the agenda? I don't know if all the members in the platform can hear. Honorable Mkhonto?
Thanks, Chair. I, Nonhlanhla Mkhonto, move for the adoption of this a program. Thank you.
The member who could second the adoption of the program. Honorable Mwali, your hand is permanently up, but I don't want us to get confused. Is there a member who will move for the seconding of the adoption of the agenda?
Chair, I second the adoption of the program.
Having been duly nominated and seconded, the program is duly adopted. Can we, with the time that remains, just look at the minutes of meetings that have been circulated to respective members? I would like to begin with minutes circulated on the 4th of April. If we can have a look at those. That was a meeting that was held on a virtual platform that dealt, in essence, with the public hearings on the 2025 Division of Revenue Bill. Effectively, the meeting gives a summation of some of the items that were shared by respective members and public inputs. The meeting concluded at 1:30 on the day, and therefore those are the broad minutes that have been circulated accordingly. I will quickly go through the respective pages, looking at it. Is there any objections to page 1? Page 2? Page 3? Page 4? Page 5? 6? Page 7? Page 8? Page 9? Page 10? And then the final page is just for signatures, which is page 11. Is there a member who will move for the adoption of the minutes of the 4th of November?
Talega Mazibuko, I do move, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Kalega Mazibuko. Is there a member who can second the minutes as a fair reflection of the appointment on the day? As things stand at the moment on the platform, only Honorable Waitlin or only Honorable Lekhanyan can second as things stand.
I second, Chair.
Thank you so much, Honorable Waitlin. We will then proceed then to minutes of the meeting held Mashile, will you put the next set of minutes on the platform? It will be minutes on the 22nd of April. These were meeting on that we held that speak to the motion for the desirability of the report as was tabled. So I need to get it in front of my own device here so that I can read it properly. Mashile, will you scroll down as we go so that I don't delay members here? You can let's go through it page by page. Page 1, is there any objection to that? Page 2. Is there any objection to page 3? Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. With those considerations in place, is there a member who will move for the adoption of the minutes of this of the 22nd of April? The members who were present, all members, at least on the platform, were present on the days. The member will move for the adoption of the minutes. Honorable Galega Mazibugo, you were there.
Yes, I've raised my hand, sir.
Oh,
Chair.
thank you so much, Honorable
I
Galega
move.
Mazibugo.
I move for the adoption of the minutes as a true reflection. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there a member who would like to second the adoption of the minutes as a true reflection of the meeting of the 22nd of April? At this stage, thank you so much, Honorable Waitlin. With that in mind, we will consider lastly the minutes of the 23rd of April. Other than that, these minutes were held on my mother's birthday. We can then proceed.
Happy belated birthday to the mother.
It is the only thing that is not minuted. That's why I can't move for its adoption. But is there any member on page 1? Are there any objections? Thank you. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. And then we move to page 6. And then page 7. With the minutes being tabled, may I ask, is there a member who would move for the adoption of the minutes as a true reflection of the meeting of the 23rd of April? Honorable Bateman.
Yes, Chair, I so move.
Thank you very much, Honorable Bateman. Is there a member who will move, who will second the adoption of the minutes as a true reflection of the meeting?
Mkhonto, I second, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mkhonto. With that deals with the 3 minutes that we're meant to consider. This concludes our business for today. May I ask, obviously, by virtue of announcements, we will then be convening next week, Wednesday, for the lockup session is the next point of the agenda. And ultimately, we'll then be able to then consider the budget and then take actions from there. Honorable members, thank you very much. There are no further announcements from my end. I truly appreciate it. This meeting is now officially adjourned. Thank you very much. May you have a good afternoon.
Thank you,
Thank
Chair.
you.
See you at the sitting at 3 o'clock.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.